So, for your podcast, your topic needs to be something that is a question. So, it has to be able to be expressed in a question, and it can't be a question that can be easily solved. You don't want it to just be like, oh, what is the answer to this problem? And then you could just answer in one word. Otherwise, you wouldn't need a podcast about it. It has to be like an almost unanswerable question or a difficult question to answer. And then what I want you to do is I want you to treat your podcast almost as if it's like a 5 paragraph essay. The great news is that you don't need to write it all out the way you have to do with a traditional 5 paragraph essay, but that's the format. I want you to think of it in those terms. So let's start from the beginning. Every 5 paragraph essay starts with an introduction, and you're going to do the same thing. So you're going to have like a hook to grab their attention. It could be like a skit that has to do something where like an imagined possible future in which your question came to life or something like that, and you act out what it would be like there. Or it could just be like a really interesting fact that grips people in. Or it could just be like a couple of sounds, like audio cues that support your idea. You're going to summarize your essential question as if it was your thesis statement. Mention the major points that your podcast is going to cover, give a little preview of what's to come, and then you're going to introduce yourself. Only first names at all times. We don't want any last names in here unless it's like a teacher. Then, like if you're interviewing me, you could say, here's Mr. Johnson for it. Okay, so here's an example, a sample of how it could be. Spanish, art, history. These are just some of the subjects we students take while in school. But should they be? Why are the subjects we take in school mandatory ones? Are these classes the best to actually prepare us for the future? Should we make changes to our current schedule? What is your ideal version of school? I'm Dan, and this is Jess, and today we're discussing the question, what is the best version of school? So that's our question that we get to at the end. We don't get to it right away, right? And we kind of give some sample subjects about maybe that some people would have some, let's say, questions about. So now we're going to go into our first paragraph, part one. Okay. So if I was sticking with this one, my theme of this paragraph or this part of the podcast would be what's the history of the current system of classes? So I'd summarize my topic sentence. How do we get to the current place that we're at? I would do some research on this and I would give the backstory of it. You're going to include an interview with someone that supports your topic or gives some more information. So here's an interviewer that I interviewed. They said the only reason that we have bells at designated times was to prepare students for factory jobs, blah, 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 blah. So after you get that great sound clip from that person, you're then going to comment on your own thoughts based on your research that you've done. Now we're going to transition into part two, right? So now it's like the current school system. Notice we started in the past, we're now in the current school system. So we're going to interview, maybe it could be some of the same person from before, or it could be other people, hopefully, right? Now our interviewer says, I think this current system works great because of, and then you might summarize what they're saying based on evidence. You're going to try to get somebody else now with a different opinion. And they're going to say, she's right about this part, but I don't know if I agree with this because according to this study from this website, and you do have to cite at least one website, some kind of article or study that was done that you're going to support in here, right? So try to get both sides of it if you can. And then finally, we get to our, our last part. And now we're going to talk about how can we improve this going on to the future. So notice what we did. We started in the past. How do we get here? What's going on right now? What's the current argument about it on both sides? And then how can we maybe improve it going forward? So in this part, we have one interviewee says, our subjects are not setting this up properly for the future. We don't need class A or B to succeed. Instead, if we were taught these classes, Y and Z, we'd be more competitive in the future marketplace. But then we have somebody else that talks about it. And then you might be saying, well, it might be tough to hear. According to this website, the US only ranks 27th in this subject, while countries that do this rank higher, right? So then you're going to back it up and with some evidence, right? So comment on it. Don't just say, that's interesting. Talk about why it's interesting, why it's relevant, or why you may not fully agree. Try to keep your opinions out of it in the first part, right? You're just asking the questions. But finally, in the conclusion, you can summarize the main points. You can comment on what you think, and then you always must end. And this is the most important part. You have to end with a prediction about the future, right? So after everything you've learned, what do you think the future holds? Or what do you think the most likely scenario is? Or a couple likely scenarios. All of those are things that I'd like for you to do in this podcast.